Hi, everybody, and welcome to Big Joe's Journal. Today, because it's been a while since I've had a haircut, and I noticed on last week's show that I was starting to look a little bit like Dagwood Bumstead, I'll be wearing a Notre Dame hat today. The University of Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish, going to be opening their football season against the Naval Academy. Now, originally, this game was scheduled for Ireland. As you know, about 3 or 4 years ago, they opened the season in Ireland. And I recall Notre Dame won it 50-0. But because of the COVID-19 problems, the game is going to be played at Annapolis before an empty stadium. And the only problem is, when's it going to be played? Well, the University of Notre Dame, like a lot of our large universities, are looking at beginning their fall semester at the beginning of August. And how this will affect the football schedule that the colleges are playing is still up in the air. Whether they're going to move up their schedule a month remains to be seen. If you're a sports fan now, just about everything is up in the air. The only thing that seems to be settled is the NBA and also the NHL. But baseball, we're still waiting to see what happens there. I know they want to get the season going around the 30th of June, which is right around the corner. And as you know, the league has proposed an 82-game schedule. The players want a 114-game schedule. Well, the way the players are looking at it means baseball season ends, regular season, ends sometime around Thanksgiving. And somehow or another, I can't see the World Series being played in Yankee Stadium the middle of January. How are they going to, they're going to clear the total field of snow? Temperature going to be, say, 10, 20 above? These guys won't be able to grip the ball good, won't be able to handle a bat, their hands will be too cold, won't be able to field well. Be a lot of errors because their hands will be so numb, they won't be able to get anything on the ball. So, at least in the world of sports, things seem to be at a standstill. Now, as far as on the national scene, as you know, not only this country, but the entire world is being torn apart by demonstrations, most of them peaceful demonstrations. And you kind of look at the causes of this. Supposedly, the cause is Mr. Floyd and his murder by a very stupid police officer from the Minneapolis PD. Someone that should have been fired long ago. And he was a senior officer. And the other three that are in jail, trying to raise bail to get out, one of them had only been on the force about 3 weeks. And another one was a part-time officer, and the other one hadn't been on that long. But they were all junior officers under the command of that particular supervisor, who, by the way, makes a court appearance today. He's being charged with murder in the second degree. And this was sort of the trigger that set things off. Well, Mr. Floyd, if you look back at his record, was no saint. He'd been in trouble in a number of cities, including Minneapolis, and I believe he was trying to pass a $20 counterfeit bill when he was arrested. Also, the fact that Mr. Floyd and the officer that killed him were well known to each other. They'd both worked at the same club. So there's some question, was this attempted murder, was it some kind of a personal matter between those two. But looking at the massive demonstrations that go on, you say, well, you know, what causes it? Well, first of all, it's frustration. With the COVID-19 epidemic, people have been cooped up at home. They've been getting very, very restless. We've seen incidences, especially in Michigan, where people were tired of the stay-at-home thing. In fact, they put on a mass demonstration in front of the governor's mansion, including some people who were armed, which was uncalled for. And people were getting frustrated. You know, we have it right here. I'll speak for myself. With no sports on TV, I'm watching an awful lot of Westerns. And I found out one thing that I never knew before, that Matt Dillon, the marshal of Dodge City and Gunsmoke, started off as a bad guy. In fact, he started off as a bank robber. He and 3 of his companions held up the bank in Dodge City, and the way old Matt got caught, he got shot. And he tried to hide out under a porch, and posse caught up with him, went to jail. Of course, he wouldn't rat on his companions. When the old marshal there that preceded him asked him, you know, said, son, you shouldn't take the rap for your 3 companions. Tell us who they are, and I'll go find them. And Matt Dillon said, I'm not going to tell you because I'll find them before you do. And of course, you know, the story goes on. He did, killed them all off, got acquitted, grounds of self-defense, went on, became a good guy, and became a deputy marshal. Then he got the old marshal ahead of him. He got did something bad or whatever, and got convicted and went to prison for 15 years, and Matt moved up to marshal. And of course, I think some of you have seen the thing called Back to Dodge, when Matt Dillon's retired, and he becomes a backwoodsman, and the gunsmith there, Newly, becomes the new marshal. Well, he goes on from there, and Matt, this series continues on now, and I don't know how many have seen the things that continue on. Matt finds out he has a daughter, and his daughter's mother, who Matt had a little liaison with, obviously, owns a big ranch in Arizona. Matt goes down there, and more adventures. The mother gets killed. Matt takes over the ranch and so forth, and that's where he is now. He's a big ranch owner in Arizona, no longer a marshal. Well, anyway, I'm getting off track here. You have to look at what causes the riots, and it's mainly frustration. And one of the areas of frustration, of course, you've got so many college students that were sent home in March, most of them, in fact, I think all of them. And in the spring of the year, college kids sort of have end-of-the-year rituals besides graduation. You know, every college has their little rumble and their little riot. You know, at U of M, they used to have a session of where usually the weekend before final exams, they'd all smoke pot. I know when I was a student at St. Michael's back in the early 50s, the big thing then in the were what they call panty raids. I read an article in the Herald about one that students at Norwich pulled off at what was formerly Vermont College in Montpelier. And obviously the writer was fairly young and wasn't aware. Probably the biggest one of all was the one at UVM. I'd say back around 52 or 53. And as I say, I was a student at St. Michael's, and St. Mike's was not co-ed then. The only women we had on campus were people taking nurses training that attended the Jean Mance School in Burlington, and they came up to St. Michael's for their courses. But otherwise, it was an all-male campus. And I remember my friend, the late Fearless Fagan, was a student at UVM. And I remember asking him one time, I said, how's the women's situation at UVM? He says, a lot better than at St. Mike's. Well, anyway, when this trouble got going at UVM, and it ran for about 3 or 4 days, and it was a real riot. Probably the biggest one they ever had in Burlington. They haven't won that big since, I know. And my friend George Senesac and I, I was going to St. Mike's, on and working on campus to help pay tuition. So the dean, who was Father D'Agostino, declared that St. Michael's, every dorm was going to be campused. Nobody was going to go out. So he came, George and I there, and I don't know what we were doing, but he said, all right, I want you boys to put all these signs in every dormitory on campus. I said, okay, Father, we'll do that. Well, we decided we'll put one in every dorm except our own. We live in senior hall. So we'll put one of these signs in every hall, tell them they're all campus, but why don't we kind of, forget the one going to senior hall. Let's go down and see what's going on. Well, we went down to Burlington, wanted to see what was going on, and boy, I tell you, they had a full-scale riot. I remember the Burlington police got one guy, and they put him in the cruiser, and probably about 10, 15 students came over, and they started rocking the cruiser, and they finally turned it over, got their buddy out of there. I don't recall whether the police officer was hurt or not. In another case, there were, I think another cruiser was set on fire, and I know there were a number of fires down there. And another thing I noticed, for the poor jerk, the poor male jerk that tried to go up the fire escape, getting up to the girls' dorms, he soon came to regret it. As he'd get up about the 3rd or 4th floor, and the coeds would grab him and they'd strip him naked and then send him back down. Send him back down the fire escape, au natural. Well, I know in and it was 58 or 59, I think, when I was working with the state police at that time. Green Mountain College in Poultney was a 2-year school, girls only. And word got out that there was a large contingent of cadets coming down from Norwich for that particular purpose at Green Mountain College. And I know we had a very strong police presence, sheriff's department, local police departments. And when they arrived, and they looked the situation over, and I forget who talked to the head honcho there from student leadership. He persuaded them, that it would be much better if they spent their weekend maybe going over to New York State and visiting Hampton Manor and the Little Club and a couple of the other bars over there. Drinking in New York State, the age was 18, in Vermont it was still 21. Now, they might be better off doing that and then going back up to Northfield and not getting in any trouble. And that took care of that one. One that I was involved in was in 1973. I think it was 73, maybe 74. I wonder how many of you recall the tennis match between Bobby Riggs and Billie Jean King. Bobby Riggs was kind of an over-the-hill tennis star, and he made a bet that he could beat the best of the women. And he took on the Margaret Smith from Australia. I believe maybe she'd won Wimbledon that year. And he took her on, and she apparently was having a bad day or so, and he beat her handily. And so he still kept crowing that he could beat the best of the women tennis players. And of course, this set up a tremendous match, and it was done at the Astrodome, I believe, in Houston, between Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs. And at that time, I was a sergeant, and I was field commander with the campus police at St. Michael's College. And as the hype for this tennis match built, we could sense that there was a certain sensation building on campus, not only St. Mike's, but UVM and everywhere else. And so it was decided that we would set up a plan, and whatever happened, we'd be ready for it. And I know down at UVM, the Burlington Police Department, Fire Department, and I believe South Burlington, and the Sheriff's Department, Chittenden County, we're going to back up the U of M campus police if anything happened down there. And at St. Michael's College is one of the few colleges that not only has its own police department, it also has its own ambulance service and its own fire department. St. Michael's Fire Department, I believe this year, is being merged with the Colchester Fire Department. But we set up a thing with the St. Michael's Fire Department, and also the Winooski Fire Department would back us up. We'd have a couple of tankers and a couple of pumpers. Now, the tanker truck, of course, pretty obvious, big tank full of water. And the pumper truck, you hook the tanker into the pumper, and the pumper feeds the water, and it's like a very, very, very heavy spray that comes out of the pumper truck. We had that set up. We also had backup state police at that time. Their local headquarters in the Burlington area were up at the old 40th and Allen, which was St. Michael's North Campus. St. Michael's had taken over most of the dorms up there. University of Vermont had a series of dorms where their married students lived. And the president of St. Michael's College lived in the house that originally had been the residence of the commanding officer at 40th and Allen. Also at 40th and Allen was public broadcasting. They had their studios there. Channel 22 also had their studios on that campus. So we had them backing us up, plus police departments from Winooski and Colchester, Essex. And we calculated that if there were any problems, it was going to be on the main campus. And it was going to be at Joyce Hall, which was one of the 4 dorms in what they call the quad. And we figured that would be where the problems would occur. And so we were pretty much prepared for what came up. We chain locked most of the doors leading outside on the campus, except for the main entryway. The main entryway, there's myself and Rolly Powell, and I can't think who the third officer was. I think it was Ernie Ream. We had shotguns loaded with rock salt. And the match went on. It was pretty obvious that Billie Jean King was going to win it and win it big, which she did. And that was what set off the little excitement. And we went into the ladies' dorm, and out in the quad, all the male students on the campus, and I think probably some spectators came up to see what was going on. They came to the main door, and the main door, of course, wasn't locked. And 2 or 3 of them came in, and I was a sergeant. And one of them says, "Sarge, you going to shoot us with shotguns?" And I said, "Why don't you come through the door and find out?" Well, they thought about it, and they thought about it. And meanwhile, you know, the crowd out there was getting restless. And the ladies inside aren't helping matters any. They're up in the upper windows throwing out their undergarments. You know, well, we held on, you know, probably around about 4 a.m., 5 a.m. in the morning. The kids, you know, they had exams coming up. Some of them had the final classes before exams. You say, well, we'll just wait them out. And about, you know, 3 o'clock or so, you could see the crowd starting to get smaller and smaller. And around about 4 or 4:30, it was over. And peace settled on the campus at St. Michael's College. And they had their final exams, they had their graduation. When I was at St. Michael's, the campus police, our big problem at that time, of course, was streaking. And this was a fad that continued on, and I know it gave us a few headaches. We had a senator from Illinois that came up as a guest speaker and was speaking at the college theater. And we wanted to make sure there weren't going to be any streakers. And I thought we had the place secured. But about halfway through the senator's speech, this female streaker goes right across the stage. I said, where the hell did she come from? But, that's part of college life. Which brings me to the theme that I am coming up with now. With these kids out of college, they're home, they don't have any jobs, they don't really want to be home, but they're feeling all this frustration. And I'm going to turn back once more. A few years back, I'm sure some of you old grads of Castle and State College remember, they had what they call, before final exams, what they call shipwreck weekend. I'm sure some of you remember that, where the college went up to Bombazine State Park, and there was a lot of beer going around, and people were having a great time. That's why they call it shipwreck weekend, because you went up there and you got shipwrecked. Well, that came to an end, and I can't remember the year, when two of them that were a bit loaded went out on the lake, canoe tipped over, and they drowned. And that brought an end to shipwreck weekend. But getting back to my main theme, people were restless. They wanted something to do. And you just needed something to trigger it off. We had COVID-19. We had an idiot in the White House that didn't know which end was up, and wasn't able to provide any kind of leadership. Still can't, never will. And that's why he'll be gone in a few months, thank God. And all it took was just one little fuse to set it off. It's like if you have a pile of dynamite. And that dynamite isn't going to do a thing until somebody lights the fuse. And the fuse was what happened in Minneapolis. And that moron of a police officer sat on George Floyd's neck and murdered him. That was the fuse that set off these demonstrations. A lot of peaceful demonstrations. Most of them are peaceful. People want to get out and vent their feelings. You have this Black Lives Matters. Of course Black Lives Matter. But so do white, Native American, Asiatic. All of lives matter. Because we're all human beings. We all have certain rights and certain dignity that certainly in many, many cases has not been respected. And people have a right to grieve, and people have a right to demonstrate. And this is what is treated off, and not only in this country, but through the whole world. That frustration. And people are working it out with these demonstrations. I think a vital situation came up over this weekend. The goofball in the White House orders out the troops, orders out combat troops. And something happened. One of his own cabinet members, one of his own appointees, the Secretary of Defense, says, hey, hold on a minute. No American combat soldier is going to fight an American citizen. He countermanded the president's orders, sent them back to their barracks. And the word was that yesterday in the Oval Office of the White House, there was a very, very heated cabinet meeting. Look at the number of former generals that have come out in condemnation and virtually called Trump an idiot. His former defense secretary, General Mathis, and Trump jumped all over him with some negative tweets. General Kelly, who was the former chief of staff in the White House, came out and contradicted Trump. He said General Mathis is an honorable man, and what he says is the truth. Mathis said the current president is a divider, and in many ways is responsible for the unrest going on in this country. General Kelly agreed. And yesterday, Colin Powell, former General Colin Powell, former Secretary of State, came out and said he's going to be voting for Joe Biden. There is a possibility, and I hope it never comes to that, of a military coup. It's very unusual when a Secretary of Defense overrules the president. And when his former generals and many, many of his current generals aren't going to listen to him anymore, I'm sure he is very, very frustrated. He is seeing what he believes is his dictatorial power going up in smoke. These demonstrations, like everything else, will play itself out. And we will go on, the democratic system will go on. We will have our elections, we will have our conventions. They may not be the same as they have in past years. The Republicans are going to be meeting in Charlotte, North Carolina, which incidentally is where the Democrats met in 2012. And the Democrats are going to be meeting in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And Joe Biden has clinched the Democratic nomination on the first ballot. And so the next big thing that he has to do is pick his running mate. And I have one particular candidate in person, and I hope he nominates her, picks her for his running mate, and that's Kamala Harris, the junior senator from California. I think he nominates her. He's won the election. It's in the bag. No, I think he has anyway. Most of the polls show that Biden is leading Trump in every state in the union. And a favorable poll taken shows that Joe Biden is leading Trump by a margin of 60 to 39 with 1% undecided. Very unusual that is that wide a margin at this particular point in time. But the country needs, right now, needs these peaceful demonstrations. They don't need a man who is about as irreligious as they come to go stand in front of an Episcopal church and hold up the Bible. Probably something he's never read. And I can see why he probably has never read it. He might find out where he's going to wind up for eternity. Be real hot down there with no air conditioning, high humidity, with no air conditioning. And so, democracy is beginning to play itself out. The big question right now is the military. Do not pull off a military coup. It would be very, very damaging to our system of government. It's true we've got a bunch of blockheads, a bunch of bootlickers in the administration. In the Senate, we've got a bunch of, I'll call them ignoramuses, beginning with Mitch McConnell, who are keeping the Senate from doing what it should do, what its constitutional obligations are. But democracy will prevail. It's just that little edge. You know, our military leaders, citizens of this country, they have the right to express their opinion. But we can ride this out for another few months. Just don't get us involved in another stupid foreign war, which this president might try to do to save his presidency. There's no question he's running scared right now. He's desperate. Yesterday he crowed about the increase in employment. Well, that's the reason, because many of these places are opening up and the people they laid off are going back to work. But that doesn't mean that the 35, 40,000 or so people that are still unemployed, things are any better for them. We have the highest unemployment rate in this country now since the Great Depression back in the 30s. And a new president, a new leadership will handle it. So let's persevere. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's getting brighter and brighter. With that, may Almighty God in His infinite wisdom continue to bless these United States of America. God love you. We'll see you all next week.